Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast, where we bring authors and their powerful stories to the forefront. I'm your host, Chris Dabbs, and today we're honoured to feature Dr. Carola Hauer, author of Against All Odds, a desperate plea for human connection. Carola grew up in Berlin, Germany, where her life was shaped by the painful realities of complex trauma. Seeking healing and a new beginning, she moved to the United States in 1985, beginning her recovery journey and eventually pursuing an education in clinical psychology. Over the years, she became a licensed marriage and family therapist, earned her doctorate from Pacifica Graduate Institute, and in 2012 became a licensed psychologist. With more than 25 years of clinical experience in hospitals, emergency rooms, and mental health facilities, Carola has witnessed firsthand the deep and lasting impact of adverse childhood experiences on survivors. Her book, Against All Odds, shines a light on the challenges faced by survivors of complex trauma and calls for compassion, understanding, and true human connection from the medical, social service, and legal systems that aim to help them. Today, we'll explore her personal journey, her professional insights, and the urgent message behind her book. Now, this is a conversation filled with honesty, courage, and hope. So, why not begin? Here we are, Carola. It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to meet you.
No problem at all. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. Let's start really with a basic, from the basics, as it were. Can you let us know what inspired you to write Against All Odds, a desperate plea for human connection?
As I went through my recovery and as I went, through my education, I began to wrap myself around my narrative. And I knew that it was different, and I kind of thought it should be mentioned, but the actual catalyst was that I served in the hospital for 10 years.
Mm.
And I met survivor after survivor in the ER, struggling with things that they couldn't explain and really being at a loss. And then when we had the pandemic, actually, I listened to Bessel van der Kolk, who I have followed for a long time. He's from the Netherlands. He's an amazing man and clinician. And I listened to The Body Keeps the Score.
Right.
And he said something that was so enlightening. He said, we old white men in our big positions can talk only so much. If you as clinician don't speak up, we're not going to have enough voices. And so I took that pretty serious, and I went to my computer just at the beginning of the pandemic and I started typing.
Mm.
Because, like in my dissertation, I felt that I'm in a position where I can give voice to things that may be too difficult for other people because they're still a lot more vulnerable. And I think the things that we're talking about, if they were a thing of the past, that'd be great, but they're not. They're still ongoing. Kids, teenagers, young people are going kind of through the same quote unquote hell that many of us have been through. So I felt that it was really important to talk about it.
So, are you talking about sort of mental anguish,
Yes.
as it were? Right. Okay. But I guess sometimes
Well,
that,
but not only,
yeah,
not
yeah,
only,
exactly.
because they're so connected.
Mm.
And then in my research for the book, I came across a lot of things in depth. So when you look at the ACEs study, the adverse childhood experiences, how connected they are to immune system issues, physical issues, um, it's astounding,
Mm. I've heard,
and
yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead,
No, no.
please.
I was just going to say, I've heard that there are, well, numerous issues that can actually affect mental health. I mean, you mentioned immune issues, but there's also like gut health and things like that as well, apparently. That
It is gut health, it is heart, it is lungs.
mm,
So it's, and I mean, when we look at the vagus nerve and we look at the connection to the stress, it goes right through our system
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it creates all sorts of adverse reactions. And they stumbled on that actually because the ACEs study wasn't set out to look at all the mental anguish. It was set out to find out why so many young people had so many serious issues physically.
Mm.
And so that's when they involved trauma questions. And that's when they found that there's a huge correlation. And,
Amazing.
a lot of people don't know that.
No,
A
so
lot of,
sorry.
no, you go ahead. We're having a discussion.
Yeah. So obviously you started this at the beginning of the pandemic. Have you also researched the cause and effect of after the pandemic on that generation of children, say, who didn't go to school, because of lockdown and things like that?
It is not necessarily something that I will like dive into because I have treated children for a long time,
Hmm.
but I'm more working now with people post-trauma,
Ah, right.
so more adults and older adults. But we can only imagine, there's plenty of research out there. We had a time where children were not supported by any counselors, medical doctors, seen by anybody. And we know that domestic violence exploded. And there's no question that childhood abuse or adverse childhood experience in the home were also increasing.
Yeah.
This is no question about it because there's no outlet,
No.
you know?
So that's a different research project, really, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that makes sense. And I mean, if you think about this one, the title itself is really powerful. I mean, what does Against All Odds mean to you personally?
You know, I looked for a number of titles. In the beginning, I wanted to say enough is enough. And that actually relates to being constantly questioned or being constantly dismissed or being constantly re-traumatized on different levels and not being believed, understood, and cared about, really. So that was the beginning. But then I thought, what I really want to talk about, what I really biggest message in the book is that there's hope. And then I was looking at all the odds against us. I used some narratives. I have 9 narratives in there. I used some experiences from the hospital. And I was always in awe. I looked at these people, including myself, and said, we have jumped so many hurdles. I mean, it was never in my manuscript to become a PhD psychologist. It wasn't even in my script to ever go to school, you know?
It's lucky you did then. Really.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
options that you have when you're in such a limited environment. And I always say I grew up in Berlin, but I
mm,
wasn't raised in Berlin.
right.
There was no raising, and you take like a fast train through all your life developmental stages.
Mm,
And you miss out on a lot of things because those times are so important. And Erickson, I like him probably the best when he talks about the developmental stages, psychosocial developmental stages. You just take this fast train and you don't get to resolve any conflict. Are you going to be shameful? Do you doubt yourself? Or are you going to be industrious and do you go out there and accomplish things, right? That's not even a question. That's not even discussed. Like,
mm,
how am I going to survive today? And are the people around me in this thing that's called family, whatever it is, are they going to survive?
right.
You have violence, you have like beatings, you have cops, you have financial nightmares where you have to answer the door and the government comes in and puts like a sticker under your furniture and the
Right.
adults are hiding. You're like 7, 8, 9 years old and you have to like deal with all of that. You don't learn anything as far as getting ready for life.
No.
You know
Because
what I mean?
you're reacting, right? So
Well, you have to constantly just read the outside, try to respond to it, stay
yeah,
out of trouble, which most of the time doesn't work because the rules and regulations in those places are not the same. They change at any time, and kind of wing it.
yeah,
And so then when you're like in your 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and even 60s, people struggle with it. And they say, one person just said to me, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know if I believe this or that, or what side I'm on, or how I want to present in the world. And that's a person in their like, early 50s. And I'm like, because we took the fast train.
mm,
That's what you do in your preteens and teens. How do I present in the world? Who do I want to be? That's what earlier years are actually
yeah,
made for.
yeah. Well, it
So,
creates your persona, doesn't it? Right.
so when you think about the walls that some of us have to climb and the fences we had to like hurdle, It's amazing. So many people, I see so many people who are absolutely beautiful and are still like struggling, and for example, in academia, I just recently had a person that I get to work with who is phenomenal. And she said, she is working on her PhD, and she said, there's always that fear that you're going to be found out,
Yeah.
that you're going to be found out that you're actually as bad as the people said you are, that you're actually as worthless as people said you are.
Yeah, yeah, imposter syndrome par excellence there, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah,
But is
yeah.
it really an imposter syndrome, or is it actually something that you have been told for so long and that has been programmed in a sense?
Hmm.
You know, and I'm going to have some new chapters, and one of them is how to rewire the brain and how to take those things down actually and create more positive thinking backed up by positive experiences, right?
Wow. Yeah, well, that would be really good because for listeners who might not be familiar with all of this and are listening to learn, how do you define then complex trauma? And how does it differ from other types of trauma then?
So we, I would say we all have PTSD.
Right.
The veterans, the people who have survived earthquakes and accidents, and sometimes it all comes together. But the complexity is, like I mentioned a little bit before, is that this is from 0 from your birth to 18. Most of the time, it happens in your home.
Mm.
And the biggest component is the betrayal. Now, I think that the Vietnam veterans era, I think that the veterans also experienced the betrayal by their own country. But this is, you have to be betrayal by the people that are supposed to love you. They're supposed to teach you. They're supposed to bond with you. They're supposed to help you to figure out, how do you cope with the world? How do you deal with who you are? And how do you dial in that it's okay to be who you are? The betrayal by the caretakers starts so early.
Mm.
And it's so interesting. So I'm writing about that. I have added a couple of chapters because I wanted to add that component. And it's like, I tell people now, I said, you know what? Because we never even learned that you can resolve conflict. But that's actually what parents are supposed to show you. So on the opposite side of that, I have somebody who said, well, my parents never fought. And then when I was like a freshman in high school, all of a sudden they're separated. And they told me 20 times not to take it personal. It wasn't my fault. Well, of course I thought it was my fault because they never had an argument. And I said, the most important piece about that is that we did not get to learn from the people around us that are in charge of us and supposed to keep us safe. What do you do with it? Peacefully, non-violently. And how are you okay after that? If you get rejected or criticized or anything like that, that's a huge area that we have to relearn when we're like in our 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and sometimes 60s and 70s. He's
Yeah.
like, I don't know how to deal with that. I said, because you never had a good example,
No. So
and go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So do you think that this is because it sounds, even from a layman's point of view, that it could be because of a poor parenting or something along those lines, right? But how can we define what a poor parent is? Because surely, it is about nurture in that respect, isn't it? And through the generations, I mean, what are we talking generationally? The whole family is dysfunctional?
Yes, number one, trauma, uh, generational trauma is handed down. And number two, poor parenting is not what causes the issues that people with like severe complex trauma actually have. Those are deliberate attacks on our physical body, on our spirit, on our mind, on our soul, where you just in combat. I used to work next to Camp Pendleton. I had a practice there, and the active military would always come in and say, well, have you ever been in combat? I'd say, not officially, but unofficially. And they looked at me and they said, what do you mean by that? I said, I didn't know if I would survive. I don't know if the people around me did survive. I had to deal with all sorts of landmines constantly. And they're like, got it.
Yeah.
I'm good. And then they
Yeah.
would start doing the work. It's very similar because you don't know where the attack is coming from. And you know what? A lot of it is unfortunately so deliberate. People deliberately grind the kids down and don't allow for any sense of self, for any self compassion, self trust, and self love to ever develop. And that's not poor parenting anymore.
No.
I'm a
No.
parent. I wasn't perfect. I know I wasn't.
Yeah.
I hope I was good enough because that's all we can accomplish anyway. But deliberately, like taking your child's everything. I mean, it's the physical body, it's the mind, it's the spirit, and you just pound it into the ground constantly.
Right.
Constantly. I mean, I think I was 6 or 7 when I had to drive like these trucks in the morning or younger. And I was clearly told that I earned my keep. It's like, at
Yeah.
6 or 7 years old,
Yeah.
you got to be kidding me.
Right.
I didn't have me. I didn't ask.
No.
And so the more you get pushed out that you are not good enough, you don't have any community, you don't have anything really, you don't belong, and that leaves you with like the deepest questions for your young adult and adult life. The other thing is it just doesn't go away.
Mm.
So many people would love for us to just, they say, well, why can't you just get over it? I would love if I could just get over it. Tell me how, and I'll do it. But that's not what it is because it's so deep in our fabric of life. And it wasn't just one time, it was ongoing to many, many, many people never knew if there would be a safe moment.
Mm.
And that's serious. That's a very serious hurdle. That's a very deep pond to fall into. So that's what I mean by odds,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, so, that's really powerful. You know, I'm the same. I'm a parent. I haven't been perfect, and my parents weren't perfect. But I think I'm fortunate that really I didn't go through anything quite like that, where every second could be a landmine. I mean, is this why you think it's so important for people, especially, professionals in healthcare or social services or law or something, to understand the unique challenges that are faced by these complex trauma survivors? Because otherwise, how would they know if they haven't been through it themselves? Much like your veteran asking you whether you've been in combat.
True. And how would you know if you don't ever ask that question?
Mm.
So we just sometimes respond differently. You can be triggered by for example, a medical procedure. I talk about surgery and I talk about all sorts of things. When I ask for help because I know my anxiety comes up and the anesthesiologist totally dismisses you, and this story has happened hundreds of times. I'm just using mine as an example. And you're told like, you have a heart rate of 45 right now. What are you talking about? And when you wake up, you're restrained. You have fought your way out. You clawed your way out. Young people are looking at you because they're terrified of you, because they think they're going to get hurt by you. And the question is, why do I have to go to that? If somebody had diabetes, we're going to take a look and make sure that the medication matches what they have, right? So if I say, or many thousands of us say, hey, I have PTSD, could you just help me afterwards? I worked with this amazing woman. I have met the best people in the world. Amazing older woman who had a horrible fall. And so what they saw was that the hip was fractured. And so they did all the surgery. But husband knew she has PTSD. She had adverse childhood experiences. And so when she woke up, she was panicked. And a big person was standing at the end of her bed and said to her, if you don't knock it off, you're going to end up in a loony bin. So do you think that she was doing anything other than getting out of that hospital?
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Nobody, but no, I don't think anybody really checked on the traumatic brain injury that she had on top of it because she went straight down on child.
Right.
But there was no psychological follow-up because she was told if she doesn't behave, she's going to be in the loony bin. I mean, that's unnecessary. What a precious person. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
Precious.
That's really harsh. I mean,
so listen to them. And all we have to do, instead of saying you're going to go to the loony bin, no, you're really crazy, all we have to do is say, what's going on? Can you tell me what's going on? And she was in a room without windows, and the big man was standing at the end of the bed, could be a man or a woman, doesn't matter, and telling her that she was absolutely psychotic and that he was going to throw in the can.
Yeah.
Where is that compassionate treatment?
Exactly. I was just about to say, I mean, that's that's a serious lack of compassion, right? Where they're just trying to deal with an initial problem without finding out the root causes.
And the problem is that it just rings so true on the inside because you have heard this so many times before. And it doesn't matter if it's 20 or 30 years in between. That's powerful. And so what that does, it activates circuits in the brain. They're so familiar. You know, I'm so embarrassed. I'm such a nonviolent person. I've taught nonviolent crisis intervention in the hospital to 2,000 employees. And then I find myself, I wake up, right? And I'm halfway there and I'm in restraints. Number one, not great, brings a lot of trauma back. And number two, these mostly young women, right? They have eyes like this and they look at you and they're like scared. It's not only embarrassing, it brings things back. And that is unnecessary. I have worked with people in ER and we reduce the amount of restraints to a huge percentage because it's not necessary. It's not necessary. Now, sometimes it is. Somebody is on PVC and they're throwing like 7 security guards around in the room. We need to do something, but most of the people don't do that. And you can just say, well, what happened? What's going on? Talk to me.
Exactly. But people. Sorry.
Go ahead. No.
No, I think that's the thing, isn't it? You're trying to teach people to be sympathetic, yes, but compassionate, definitely. But they're in a situation which is pressured because of time, pressured because of, well, physicality, I guess.
Sure. And I understand all that. I've been in the midst of like frontline work for a long time, but there's still ways of talking. I know that for sure because I've seen it, and I'm just encouraging. And here's another thing. Only because our stories sound kind of crazy, some people don't believe us. I'm talking about the people who really experienced this. Is there a small number of people who sometimes talk about it? Yeah, but those of us who are authentic and those of us who've been through these nightmares, why would I want to add to my story? I want to get rid of it, or I want to deal with it, and I want to be able to have a normal life. So then when you get, I have enough in my book that people know that the amount of sexual abuse that I survived was probably a little bit more than what somebody said to me. That was a friend who said to me, oh, she says, your little molestation? Oh, I had that too. But we get discredited and dismissed. So I talked about my car accident, right? And when I was with the arbitrator in this on this crazy journey of these lawyers who thought that they could just have me for lunch, and they did, discrediting me because I have a past.
Right.
So I supposedly make a bigger deal out of it. My car was lifted up in the air, spun around, flew around, bounced a couple of times. And the guy said to me, for other people, that would be an oops moment, and they would just continue driving. So how would you do that? And I'm not alone.
Yeah.
This is not so much about me. for me, it's an avenue to get some of these stories across. So we don't need to be disbelieved. And we also don't need to have anybody carry our load. We already have done that.
Yeah.
We also don't ask for pity. I don't want any pity. Can you
No.
just give me some human decency? That's
I
all we're
think that's,
asking for.
yeah, that's it, isn't it? Not being dismissive and not trying to manipulate you and trying to point you out as being dismissive. I think what's that called? Is it gaslighting or whatever it is nowadays as well? Something.
My
Um,
favorite is when they one up you. Oh, I had that too.
yeah. Go on, explain. Yeah.
I have a young woman who, they're all young to me. I have a young woman who went to the hospital and she has 10 out of 10 ACEs, which means every area covered, right? And she had in her chart that she has PTSD and that she can have some benzodiazepine for procedures. And the nurse was just fighting her the whole way. She said, why are you here? Well, I have like a bowel obstruction, right? And she said, well, how would you know that? Well, if I need a CT, would you please give me some of, the anti-anxiety medication? She said, you don't need that. What happened? Bowel obstruction, CT, panic attacks, throwing up. And then she got an NG tube. And she says, I feel like throwing up. And the nurse says, can't throw up with that tube in your nose. She threw up 13 or 14 times with the tube. And that.
Yeah.
I mean, would we do that to somebody who was walking with a cane? No. Would we do that with somebody in the wheelchair? Well, unfortunately, it's probably not a 100% answer. But can we just allow for those hurdles to be in our life? We're not hurting anybody. I'm not asking for anything that hurts anybody. And so are the hundreds and thousands of people that have this type of trauma.
Yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, another point is, in your book, you're talking about freeing oneself from the chains of childhood abuse. So what do you see that process looks like? And what are the first steps that someone can take towards healing?
Do you know what? I think just understanding that your story is somewhat different. There were some things that went on, probably not all your fault. So you're beginning to understand that there was another component from the outside is helpful. Getting somebody professional to talk about it, and hopefully somebody who's trained in trauma. It helps. Doesn't mean people have to have had the same trauma, but it helps if, and there's lots of wonderful training out there these days. There are amazing mentors out there. So it helps because I had a young woman who got strangled by the partner so badly that she was seconds away from dying. So when she crawled out and got to the help she needed, they told her that I don't know how many seconds she had. Her eyes were completely bloodshot, as you get strangulated, right? She walked into a therapist's office and the therapist says, "Ooh, you need to get out of here. You're my daughter's age, and that freaks me out, and I can't deal with this."
Great.
It just hurts my heart.
Yeah, right.
And it hurts people. And then we go back into the old loop, the old messages. And we can re-traumatize people to quite a degree. And how do they know they're not going to lose somebody after that? If you're made fun of, if you're laughed at, if you, in the spotlight and they're shining it on you when you're at your worst, right? That doesn't help. We want to save lives. Every single life we can save, that's what we're going to try to do. Any improvement we can make, that's what I'm advocating for. I'm not asking for special rights or anything at all. I'm just asking for empathy and compassion.
Well, that would be nice, at the very least, I think, because surely if people have moved on, or not necessarily moved on, sorry, probably it's more correct to say have learnt to live with whatever's happened to them. There's going to be some struggle or some problems that people will come across because whilst they've created defense mechanisms. I don't know what, you can tell us what they are. They've created those defense mechanisms as children, And then when they move into adulthood, you know, they're not necessarily translatable, are they?
They're not, they're not. And you know what? Then people tell you to get rid of them. No, you don't want to get rid of them. You want to modify them. You want to dial them down. You want to use them when you need to use them and dial them down so they don't obstruct your life. You know?
And so,
One of the things that we just carry for a long time, somebody just said that to me. She said, you know, I used to think everything is life or death. And I'm beginning now. She's in her 40s, she has 2 kids, beautiful person. She said, I'm just now beginning, you know what, this is life. I can do this, and it's not going to take me over. It's like real life, everyday experiences. Because you think in black and white. When you're that little, everything seems like, I mean, you don't know if you're going to survive or not, right? And when you still have that mentality, you go into a job, you go into a university, and other people look at you like, what's wrong with you? You know, this is only this or that. But in your own like hardware and software and filters, just like, whoops, I'm going to be destroyed.
mm,
You know, I'm like this woman said, I feel like I'm going to be found out. Or you feel like you're just going to be wiped off the globe, like erased.
yeah,
You know, those are feelings that we have to work with. And so the more positive experiences we can have, like our dialogue right now, is so helpful because it's like all we want to do is communicate, you know, and have some support.
yeah,
Most people who get panicky and sometimes aggressive and angry, if I walk up to them and say, hey, let's take a moment. When you're ready, tell me what's going on. You really want to hear it? I'm like, yeah, I do. Talk to me. That doesn't mean I have to take it on. That doesn't mean I have to fight the battle. I'm just going to listen. You know, the human beings, we're all human beings. And some of us didn't have to go through it, and some of us did. And here's the worst part, there are still kids and teenagers going through this as we speak. That makes me sad,
mm.
you know?
It does. I mean, I think I think I now understand when I mentioned earlier on about the imposter syndrome that that really doesn't cut it because if you're talking about something being black or white, I know what you mean. So yeah, in other words, the consequences of this particular thing, which might be really small, in your mind perhaps are being seen as something like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm gonna lose my job or something like that. Something, yeah, earth shattering. When in fact,
Absolutely.
yeah, I see what you mean.
You're hyper alert, you're hypersensitive in the beginning, right? Because you had to be.
Mm,
I mean, I write about it like, I don't know, 6, 7, I don't know, probably in that area is when I was actually in charge of that big fat truck that I drove with this like person that was my stepfather who was a monster. And so he would scream at me if I didn't wake him up at the right time while he was driving. So do you really think I don't know what's going on when I drive my car? And I don't know if I had a green or red light? Trust me, I do.
mm, well, no, exactly.
Still. Mm.
Yeah, well, our conversation and your book really emphasizes, we've been talking about compassion and open-mindedness and kindness. I mean, why do you believe then that human connection is so vital in recovery? Why can't somebody, I don't know, just get over everything, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't believe that they can, but I'm interested to know why you think that human connection can really help someone to recover.
I do believe actually that we overcome a good portion of it by ourselves. There's plenty of research, by the way, on therapy. And if you take like the control group after, let's say, an earthquake in San Francisco or something like that, I think it's about 30% of people who never got any therapy and got over it.
Oh, right.
You
Good.
get over some things, but it's very difficult to get over the things when you're in society, you're part of society. We're individuals and we're also universal. And we also need community because community actually makes you feel stronger. I love metaphors, and I did a piece of art. And I was thinking about, if society is over here, here's the island with all the people that had like ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and you feel like you have been pulled out and you don't belong. And that's supported every day by the things that are happening, right? So you don't just all of a sudden join because you can't, because you don't play by the same rules. You don't have the same, we do have resilience, we have a lot of resilience, but we may not exactly have the same tools and we don't exactly speak the same language. So, in order to be able to rejoin the growth of society, I need some connection to be able to make that journey. It makes me stronger, it makes us more resilient, and it makes us also feel heard and seen and acknowledged and loved. You know, it's huge.
Yeah, sure. So this is what you're talking about with rewiring, really, is, now you're having positive experiences,
Yes.
which hopefully will outweigh or help to
Yeah, we can build on them. And if we build on them, actually, the other circuits that have been negatively loaded will actually get less and less and less and less. It's like walking on grass. If I walk the same path on grass, eventually you can see my footsteps and eventually nothing will grow there anymore. But if I leave that path behind and I create a new one, this one will overgrow.
Right.
And that's what our brain is capable of.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for.
No, I like that. That's good. Yeah, I'm going to remember that.
I
So
love it.
you describe your book as a bridge, okay, between survivors and service providers. That's a way to put it, isn't it? I mean, what key message do you hope that both groups take away from your book?
The biggest message is it's possible to heal. And the more we can reach out to each other, and that doesn't mean I want to take away from anybody who is a quote unquote non-survivor of ACEs. I just want to be able to connect, and I don't want to be discredited all the time. And so give us a chance, give us a moment. Brene Brown in the Atlas of the Heart, she's so right on when I have a quote of hers in the book. Empathy is not about me handing things to you and you running with them. Empathy is about believing me and not criticizing me and arguing with me. And that doesn't mean we're going to make things worse, and it doesn't make we're going to make things better. It actually happened. Believe me. And that's it. It could be a stranger sitting next to me and saying, "Whoa, I'm really sorry that happened to you." That's all. Because then we have a sense of belonging. It makes us stronger. It makes us not to feel so alone. Because when you're in a quote unquote family that is like in a field of landmines, you don't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
Nowhere. There's no sense of belonging.
So a non-combative encounter, I guess, can really make a big difference. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, you like the message you matter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Or even stronger, the message that everything is kind of going to be okay because this person hasn't attacked me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a positive encounter. I have so many positive encounters with just people, I mean, stores or anywhere. I have the nicest responses and they matter. They matter. They are important. That's important feedback. And now I can step into the part of me that was kind of disowned in the beginning because you couldn't be nice.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have made it.
Well, no, exactly.
So yeah, but you know what? There's hope, 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 hope out there, and people can recover. And I certainly have recovered parts by myself, but I also needed help with other parts. And just educationally, I didn't know that I took a freight train. That's a good one. Fast train through the developmental stages, right?
Mm.
And what are all those complexes? And I studied the stages and I regurgitated all of that, right? And then I looked at it. And then when I just did the chapter on the brain and the rewiring, it's like these little newborns need to know from us how to be in relationship. They need to learn from us very early on how we deal with each other.
Mm.
And if they don't get that, then part of the circuits are not developed and the other ones are going to be developed. And so I want people to just be aware of that. You know, it's like, please take a breath, pay attention, and just be there for a moment.
Yeah. And if it could start in childhood, if people realize that their actions are imprinting, in people's psyche, that's the thing, isn't it?
And so early on,
Mm. Yeah.
early on.
Yeah.
And if we think, oh, people have told me, oh, the kids don't know anything. I worked in a shelter and the woman came in and wonderful person. And she said, oh, my children don't know anything about the fights we had, right? Well, in a shelter, you see everybody, right? You see the mom, you see the kids, you see everybody. So I see the three kids. The only thing, the first thing that they drew for me, the oldest one, it may have been 4 or 5, was a bed, 3 faces underneath, and all sad. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Because we think they don't know, but they do.
Yeah.
In their little bodies and minds, wherever they are age-wise, they are forming things accordingly. They know.
Yeah. And at that age, what the norm then is to be scared, right? And worried, which isn't right.
Right.
As you say, you're taking that fast train through innocence, and leaving that behind, and childhood and things.
Innocence is one of the stops that you don't even stop.
Yeah,
You
it
just go right through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Integrity, loyalty, care, comfort, love. You just go and you go right to survival.
Yeah. Well,
That's just sad.
Well, Carola, we're running out of time. Okay, so
Love it.
but we could talk for hours. So my last question to you then, right, is if you could change one thing about how our systems of medical, legal, or social work, really, how they approach complex trauma, what would you do? What would you make happen?
Medically, I would definitely say most in hospitals and everything, it's required, but not necessarily passionately executed. Number one, ask the question if anybody has had any trauma. Also, talk about what trauma actually is and give people the freedom to talk for a moment. That came out in the ACEs study, and Dr. Folletti, who said, I think he was an internist, and he said he will start every intake with that question. And it leads like to 10 times better outcomes. And then, you know what, as friends and family, I think my biggest and most important message is this: we're not going to be recovering in this like straight line. There will be dips in there. There will be moments where we have setbacks. That could be chemical dependency, that could be an anger issue, could be panic attacks, could be eating, it could be anything. Trust me, the person who is experiencing it is most disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can just focus on, it's not the straight road, it's going to be a little bumpy. So to just have faith and to talk it through gently and in a positive way and say, what can I do? Instead of saying, I can't believe you did that again. And you know what? I don't have any, I've seen people, I saw a young man who was, oh gosh, he came to the hospital and he was depressed and he attempted suicide, unfortunately. And so he was picked up by a family member. And I happened to leave with him at the same time. And I heard the person, he said to him, go over a cigarette, you will never get another cigarette. Do you know what you have done to our family? And I just kept walking and I thought, oh God, please help them. And, he was right back, not too far down the road, because people don't do anything to the family. They're doing it to themselves first. It's traumatic for people to wake up post-suicide attempt and not have any recollection.
Yeah.
So they feel bad enough. And so let's just help each other. We're not wanting to take away from anybody. We also don't want to have to give and give and give all the time and pretend these lives that we can't sustain. We want peaceful lives. I have a pretty peaceful life at this point. Never thought I would get there, ever.
Not with your history, right? That's the thing. Yeah, exactly. Well, your expectations, really. I think not even expectations. It's your well, I'm trying to think of the right word. Not expectations, but that's what you just thought was going to happen. You know, it was going to be the landmines were going to go off and all of those things. So, oh wow. Well, listen, Carola. I mean, this conversation could go on for days, right? Because it's super important, I think, to talk about this, and it's really important for us to sort of understand that complex childhood trauma can affect one into, well, as you said, 60s, 70s, and further. And it's never too late to try and do something about it. Yeah.
Never.
Well, Carola, it's been fantastic talking to you. And that brings us, unfortunately, to the close of today's episode of the BrightWord Books podcast. Well, a heartfelt thank you to you, Dr. Carola Hauer, for sharing your story and your important work against all odds, a desperate plea for human connection. I think that we've listened to your journey from overcoming your own complex trauma to dedicating, did you actually overcome it? That's the question, but that's for another time, right? So, I mean, you're dedicating your life to supporting survivors, and it reminds us of the courage that it does take to heal. And it's quite a good statement to say that, but I think it really does take courage. And it also takes responsibility that we all share to respond with compassion and understanding. And if today's conversation resonated with you, listeners, I really do encourage you to explore Carola's book to gain a deeper understanding of the lifelong effects of complex trauma and how we as a society can avoid re-traumatization and instead foster connection and support. We've heard some great stories today. We've heard some case studies. And we know that, Carola, you really do know what you're talking about. And in your book, we'll find links to all sorts of help and just things to think about to move on. So thank you very, very much for listening, everybody. And, well, that's it for the BrightWord Books podcast for today. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep opening your heart to stories that matter, just like Dr. Hauer's. Thank you very much, Carola. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your kindness, and thank you for your support.
No problem. Speak to you again sometime.